The Washington Commanders season hinges on an offensive line that is finally getting the opportunity to turn into a real cohesive unit. That and more coming up right now on Locked On Commanders.
You are Locked On Commanders, your daily podcast on the Washington Commanders. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
This is Locked On Commanders. I am David Harrison, your guy on the ground covering the Washington Commanders for WUSA 9. You can also find me covering the team for Sports Illustrated's CommanderGameDay.com. Follow me on X at DHarrison82. And of course, you can find me here at Locked On Commanders 5 days a week. Thank you for making Locked On Commanders your first listen or your first view to the everydayers. Those of you who come through for every single episode, a special thank you goes out to you every day, but especially for coming through today. If you're new to the program, thanks for finding us. Hopefully you like what you hear and you come back again real soon. On today's episode, we are going to talk about Dan Quinn's wow moment. We're going to talk about some chemistry things, but we're going to start it all off with the offensive line that looks like it's finally getting to its healthiest point, at least so far, that we've seen of training camp. Not quite the healthiest it's going to be all year, but pretty good for what we've seen so far through training camp. All of that coming up on today's episode of Locked On Commanders, a proud part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And all of that brought to you today by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create your account, use the promo code LOCKEDONNFL to get $20 off your first purchase. The trenches and the big picture. That's how we're going to kick off today's episode of Locked On Commanders. The flashy weapons draw the headlines. Obviously, they get the highlights and all that stuff. They get you your fantasy wins. But the most important development for this team right now are the 5 guys up front and that they're finally starting to get some reps together. Laramie Tunsil, left tackle. Brandon Coleman, left guard. Center, Tyler Biadasz. Right guard, Nick Allegretti. Right tackle, Andrew Wiley. Right tackle, Josh Connolly Jr., also out here getting reps, but those 5 guys have not been able to get consistent reps throughout training camp for one reason or another, whether it's veterans ramping up or injuries to young guys, things like that. There's just been a mixture. We've talked to Dan Quinn, we've talked to some of these coaches about the struggles of having to kind of, piecemeal lines together throughout the training camp session. And they've all acknowledged, look, there's good things about these guys getting more reps than they would normally get because these other starters are in, but you do want to see these starting 5 guys together as much as possible as the season gets ready to get ramped up. And that is the most significant, hard, quote-unquote, news for me today, is that you get to watch the offensive line drills. You get to see quarterback Jayden Daniels out here. And look, we're not able to see any more of the full team drills that they do out here at practice because we're no longer at training camp rules. We're now in regular season rules. They protect a lot more during the regular season rules. But just reading the tea leaves, right? That's what we got to do out here. And you see those 5 guys going through all the O-line drills together, going through them, one by one in that order, things like that. A couple of combo block drills. You see Laramie Tunsil and Brandon Coleman working together. And then you see Nick Allegretti and Tyler Biadasz working together. So you just kind of put those things together. Obviously, they're expecting those guys to line up next to each other, right? And it aligns with Dan Quinn's talks or comments about liking the quote-unquote athleticism of the group. And that's pretty much been a theme, not just on the offensive line, but for this entire roster. Definitely prioritizing athleticism over a lot of other things. If you have a high athleticism score, we can work with you. We even see running back Kaz Allen get a couple of years to come through here and try to prove to this staff that he can be part of their future plans just because of that athleticism. Quarterback Jayden Daniels, after the game, held a press conference, said he doesn't want to set specific standards necessarily, but he does stress, quote, "I hold ourselves to a high standard of execution," end quote, and that, of course, is across the board. Bobby Johnson expects a lot out of this offensive line. Jayden Daniels expects a lot just out of the offense and himself in general, and clearly, we've seen it time and time again in football. You can have a great quarterback, but if you don't have protection for him, it doesn't much matter. You can have a great running back, but if you can't open lanes for him, it doesn't much matter. That offensive line is really where this offense is going to either hum or they're going to crash and burn. So to see these starting 5 guys getting reps together here towards the end of, training camp is officially over, but towards the end of the training camp period is very encouraging, to say the least. When asked about left tackle Laramie Tunsil, Jayden Daniels described him as, quote, "very quiet, but also a smooth dude." Also added, quote, "I'm happy we traded for him. It puts a smile on my face," end quote. And of course, 5-time Pro Bowl veteran left tackle would put a smile on any quarterback's face, even a left-handed quarterback. If you get a Pro Bowl caliber left tackle, even though it's not your blind side, you're still going to be happy to have him out there. I'm sure Jayden was happy to see the team invest a first-round pick in the right tackle, even though it's not his blind side. And all those things. So some good news happening with the offensive line. And then again, of course, Sam Cosmi starting the season on the physically unable to perform list. Will have to miss at least the first 4 games of the season because of that. But he continues to work out. from everything that we can gather, continues to look good in his progress and making his efforts to get back on the field as soon as possible and really shore up that offensive line. And once you have that, you've got that, that line of Laramie, Brandon Coleman, Tyler Biotish, Sam Cosme there at right guard, and then Andrew Wiley rotating probably with Josh Connerly Jr. Eventually, the rookie Connerly is expected, I should say, to take over that job there at right tackle fully. And you've got guys like Nick Allegretti and Andrew Wiley playing depth roles, and that's the kind of depth that every offensive line coach, every head coach, every offensive coordinator just dreams of having on their team. Another talking point here, Dan Quinn got his opportunity a little bit. Obviously, yesterday's press conference with Adam Peters on Wednesday was mostly Adam Peters, and it was Adam Peters and Dan Quinn, but it certainly was mostly Adam Peters fielding the questions just because we don't get to talk to him near as much. So Dan Quinn getting a few roster questions today with the roster set, talking about and DQ shared some insight about the difficulty of the process. And again, echoed some statements that he made yesterday, but just kind of wanted to reiterate to everybody's understanding that while this period is difficult on the decision makers and the evaluators and all that, they fully are on board with understanding that it is more difficult for the players, and especially the players that are getting cut, the players that now have to find new teams, or even spend the rest of the season training while they wait till next training camp to hopefully get opportunities with other teams. And so that there are some decisions that quote unquote keep us up at night, receiving late night texts from Adam Peters about certain groups or about certain players saying, hey, what do you think about this? What do you think about this guy? That's just kind of behind the curtains a little bit of the process that really goes on behind the scenes when these guys are crafting these rosters. DQ also echoed Adam Peters' mantra of this isn't really a 53-man roster, it's a 70-man roster. Emphasized the practice squad players have to prepare like they're starting because you never know when the need is going to arise for you to get called up. And of course, if you want to look at an example of that from recent memory, especially last season, you look at guys like Carl Davis, who got called up in late in the year, but you also look at guys like running back Chris Rodriguez Jr., who had all of his practice squad call-ups used, eventually ended up on the active roster as a signed player, bouncing back and forth between practice squad and the active roster. And then this year, parlayed those efforts and that performance into an opportunity for himself earning a spot on the 53-man initial active roster here at the Commanders in 2025. So if you're a guy that's landing on the practice squad now, you have a true blue teammate who has not only walked the path that you're walking, but has shown you the success that can come from it if you just stick with it and you get it going. Because DQ said it's going to happen, quote unquote, that players get called up from the practice squad. And it's one thing to hear the general manager talk about a 70-man roster, all these things, but it's totally different to hear the head coach talking about it. And honestly, to me, it's a little bit more encouraging to hear the head coach talking about it because Dan Quinn refers to himself as a developmental coach. He's a guy who likes to take young talent, young athleticism, give it the knowledge of the football game and the NFL game specifically, pair it with that athletic ability, and then really turn them into true impact players on the NFL roster. So to hear him say this isn't just a 53-man roster, it's a 70-man roster also means that during the course of the year, we're not just worried about the starting linebacker, getting the reps and getting the education, for example. We're worried about that practice squad linebacker or that practice squad running back also getting those reps. Speaking of which, the Washington Commanders fleshed out their practice squad a little bit more fully here on Thursday, so getting more players into the building to be able to do that. And in making those decisions, Dan Quinn said the coaches actually rank every player for week 1 role, but then they also rank every player for a week 5 role, which always kind of reminds me of draft analysis. Every time you do a scouting report, most scouts, every organization can be a little bit different here and there, but for the most part, your scout does a rookie season evaluation projection. Here's where we think this guy can fit as a rookie. And then 3 years from now, here's also where we think this guy can fit. And that's kind of how they go through making the decisions of where they're going to stack guys on their draft boards and whether or not they're going to take guys in specific rounds. And while the offensive line solidifying is absolutely crucial, it's Jayden Daniels' growth, command of the offense, and his innate connection with wide receiver Terry McLaurin that is going to determine the team's ceiling. So we go from the floor, the security of it, the offensive line, to how high this offense can really go. Coming up next on today's episode of Locked On Commanders, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And today's episode is brought to you by Upside. Locked On Commanders fans, are you still paying full price for gas? Stop leaving money behind. Get real cash back every time you fill up with the free Upside app. I'm always driving around Ashburn. With the season starting, I'll be thinking about that drive to the stadium as well. At first, I thought getting paid for gas I was already buying was too good to be true, but it's totally legit. Real people are getting paid just for their daily commutes, and you can too. You can earn up to $300 a year just from buying the gas that you already need. Simply download the free Upside app in the App Store or Google Play right now. Use a limited time promo code TOUCHDOWN to get an extra 25 cents back per gallon on your first fill up. You can cash out anytime from your bank account through PayPal or an e-gift card for Amazon and other brands. So don't let this offer drive on by. Download the free Upside app now using my limited time promo code touchdown. Disclaimer, offers vary by user and location. Go to upside.com for terms and conditions. Today's episode is also brought to you by Game Time. Now, NFL season is back, and honestly, there's nothing better than being in the stadium surrounded by fans cheering on your favorite team. But let's be honest, getting tickets can be a hassle. That's why I use Game Time, the app that gives you the advantage, gives the advantage back to the fans. I was just looking for tickets to some events that are coming up in the DC area, and I was getting so frustrated with prices jumping at checkout. I pulled up Game Time, and in just a couple of taps, I saw amazing deals, and I love that all the fees are included when you toggle on that fee inclusion. So when you get to checkout, there's no surprises. Plus, you get to see the views from your seats, so you know exactly what you're getting yourself into when you buy your tickets. And with the Game Time guarantee, you're always assured that you're getting the lowest price possible. So download the Game Time app, create your account, use the promo code LOCKEDONNFL to get $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, that promo code LOCKEDONNFL, LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Continuing now with today's episode of Locked On Commanders, we're going to talk about forging the offensive firepower. That's the theme for this segment. The chemistry between quarterback Jayden Daniels and wide receiver Terry McLaurin never has been in doubt, even though we're concerned a little bit about Terry's conditioning, getting on the practice field, getting those football reps, right? Talking about being in shape and being in football shape and how important those practice reps are. I've been getting asked questions about it in mailbags and everything else. I've been telling you guys, I'm not worried about the chemistry. Why? Well, there's a few evidentiary pieces that we've had out here on the practice squad. Jayden Daniels coming in with Zach Ertz, not day 5 of training camp, not day 10 of training camp, day 1 of OTAs, looking like they never left, right? I remember going back to OTAs, and I told you guys, looking at that practice early in June, it looked like we were just right back in January, February time frame. They had won the NFC Championship game, and this was just a practice getting ready for the Super Bowl. You see that connection with Deebo Samuel growing incredibly quick. You see the relationship with Jalen Lane growing, extremely well as Jalen Lane continues to develop. More on him here in just a second. And so while that relationship between he and Terry, never in doubt, we got some reinforcement, some reassurance from Dan Quinn out here on Thursday, said that there was a really great deep pass off a play action from Jayden Daniels to Terry McLaurin that really just kind of reiterated that relationship and really kind of demonstrated that to him that they were going to be just fine, once Terry McLaurin gets fully up to football shape and all those things. Terry yesterday said that it was like riding a bike. Jayden Daniels said in his press conference on Thursday that he told us Terry was going to be back, never had a doubt in his mind, and that you never lose that. Terry McLaurin coming out there, it's just like riding a bike. He never had any doubt that Terry was going to have that talent and that they were going to have that connection. Also talking about how they communicate with Cliff Kingsbury, what he wants to run to prove that, or to improve the offense and the offensive efficiency, and that communication between Jayden Daniels and Cliff Kingsbury continuing to not only exist because it was already there last year, but it's continuing to grow even into year 2. We've got an important request here. Locked On Commanders fans, we want to hear from you. We put together a survey to learn more about our listeners and make your favorite podcast even better. This is your chance to tell us what you like, what you don't, and answer questions about our advertising. Please go to lockedonpodcast.com/survey to get started. Everyone who completes the survey is entered in for a chance to win a $100 Amazon gift card. Again, that's lockedonpodcast.com/survey. You can also find the link in the show notes. Thank you ahead of time for helping us out. Let's get back to Daniels and McLaurin, the connection there. Dan Quinn, again, detailed the process of getting his star quarterback and his wide receiver back in sync, so that Jayden Daniels confirmed their chemistry, has not missed a beat. Daniels on McLaurin specifically, quote, "I told you he's coming back soon. I'm so excited." Dan Quinn praised the time on task. And time on task, a little bit of a different verbiage. Earlier in training camp, earlier in the offseason, we heard Dan Quinn leaning on banked reps, right? The fact that Terry McLaurin and Jayden Daniels had so many practices last year throughout training camp, throughout the season, even off-season work, between practice work, things that they did on their own time, things like that. He said all those reps are banked and all those reps are incredibly valuable now that Terry is here, now that Terry is signed and he's back on the practice squad. they're getting that time on task to build off those banked reps and get back up to speed where they need to be. So very exciting things going on there, and that getting reps, Jayden Daniels said, that's the only thing we can really go with, end quote, is to get those reps to get back on the field together. Somebody mentioned like he was riding a bike. Jayden said, I don't think it's ever going to leave, quote unquote, when he talks about Terry, and later added that he has the same amount of trust in Terry as he did last year. And he just kind of pointed out, he said, y'all saw what we did last year. Nothing's going to change there. And I think that can be a little bit of an underrated thing. Dan Quinn also talked about that when he talked about the complementary value of Jayden Daniels and Terry McLaurin. He stated that you basically have a receiver who's really great at tracking deep balls, catching deep passes, and you've got a quarterback who's not only great at dropping in those deep ball passes, but also just loves to throw them, right? And that's, of course, the thing that everybody loves to see. As far as defining the offensive identity with some of his weapons back, including guys like Noah Brown, who missed a significant portion of training camp due to that injury that he suffered in OTAs. He is also back. Today was a padded practice, and Noah Brown also on the field with Brandon Coleman, with Terry McLaurin. So great to see all these guys out here for a fully padded practice. Jayden Daniels was talking about his command of Cliff Kingsbury's offense, and we were able to hear about how it's being put on full display out here in practice. Daniels' comfort level in his second year with Kingsbury has grown, and Jayden says, quote, even this year I would tell him, I think I'd rather do this, and that he would just go with it, because at the end of the day, we both want to win, end quote. And this is something about the Jayden Daniels, Cliff Kingsbury dynamic that we really saw take hold last year. And honestly, go back to week 3, right? The third week of a rookie quarterback's NFL career, Jayden Daniels, Monday Night Football, basically telling Cliff Kingsbury, hey, we need to dial up this specific play. They dial it up, and boom, next thing you know, there's a touchdown pass to Terry McLaurin. The Washington Commanders are getting a big upset win in prime time, on the road, right before they head to Arizona. So that relationship between Jayden and Cliff not only getting better just because they both want to win and they're both competitors, because there's a trust value there. Jayden has said enough times to Cliff, these players have said enough times to Cliff, hey, we want to do this, we want to do that, this is what I see, this is what I think is vulnerable against the opposing defense. And Cliff says, yeah, let's go out there and let's do these things, and they're successful. And so that relationship continues here into year 2. That confidence also extended in the entire receiver room, which Dan Quinn called, quote unquote, a fierce competitive group. Jayden explained that his approach to distributing the ball is to, quote, go where the defense allows me to throw the football, but I just think it just makes our offense that much more dynamic, end quote. And, look, there are certain receivers that transcend coverage, right? We got Terry McLaurin one-on-one downfield against, Cam Taylor-Britt. That guy's open, right? Like, there may be a body next to him, but he is open. And then you've got other receivers where, if there's a guy in position, maybe he's not as open, or at least hasn't proven to be as open, right? So those things absolutely matter, but having the dynamic ability they have in the receiver room with Deebo Samuel now, Jalen Lane coming on, these Noah Brown back healthy, it's really given Jayden Daniels a lot to work with, and offensive coordinator Cliff Kingsbury. And the development of rookie receiver Jalen Lane, speaking of him, Jayden said, quote, I would just say his willingness to learn, and he continues to get better each and every day. From OTA to now, you can see the progression, end quote. And that is something that we've heard echoed from Dan Quinn, Cliff Kingsbury, Bobby Ingram, pretty much everybody that has a hand in seeing the young wide receiver play on the football field has echoed that same sentiment. I know John Duran, reporter for WSA 9, was out here with us at practice on Thursday, got some time with Jalen, so look out for WSA 9 for that report coming sometime here this week before we get to officially week 1. The Stars are getting their work in, but it's the strategic development of role players like running back Chris Rodriguez Jr. that shows Dan Quinn is building more than just his starting lineup. That and more coming up right now on Locked On Commanders, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode of Locked On Commanders brought to you in part by Prize Picks, the daily fantasy platform that lets you turn your football predictions into real rewards. Preseason is already heated up. The football landscape in the NFL regular season is now right around the corner, literally right around the corner. A week from now, we have got NFL regular season football. Not Commanders football, but NFL regular season football. Whether you got your eyes on a big-name quarterback or a breakout running back, Prize Picks makes it easy for you to get in the game. I've been looking at the board for week 1. I'm already thinking about pairing Jayden Daniels more than passing yards, Terry McLaurin more than receiving yards, and Prize Picks is so simple to play. You just do exactly what I did. Pick 2 to 6 players and project more than or less than on their stat projections. And in week 1, you even get a max discount on Dak Prescott with just 0.5 passing yards in the season opener. on Thursday night. The flex play option is a game changer. Even if one of your picks miss, you can still win. It's fast, safe, and secure to withdraw your money when you win. Download the Prize Picks app today. Use the code LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 in lineups after your first $5 play at Prize Picks. Run your game. Head coach Dan Quinn's biggest wow moment of training camp had nothing to do with flashy touchdowns, but rather seeing the focus and the improvement happening in the defensive communications and situational football this franchise desperately needs. And he actually pointed at one point to the rise of running back Chris Rodriguez Jr. and a revamped return game, right? So what does Chris Rodriguez Jr. have to do with the return game? Well, special teams is a valuable part for every team and for every player, especially ones that aren't necessarily like your Terry McLaurins or your Jayden Daniels of the world. Quinn pointed to C-Rod and said that with his consistency, he's a player that the team, quote unquote, really trusts and who has, quote, worked hard to change his body this offseason. We've talked about that here on the program, and that the decision to keep 4 running backs was influenced by the evolution of the kickoff return game here in the last couple of years. We talked about this last year, actually. Linebackers and running backs seeing a big boost in their roster viability because of the new kickoff style. And we see the team this year, 4 running backs, 8 overall linebackers. Sure, some of them are outside linebackers, not really the same category of play that we're talking about, usually off-ball linebackers. When you look at Chris Rodriguez Jr., you look at Ali Cajo, you look at Kane Medrano, these guys are going to be expected to perform. Colson Yankov is also in that batch. They're going to be expected to perform just as much on special teams as they are anywhere else on the roster. And that DQ said that the special teams roles feel, quote unquote, running back-ish, right? Not enough to keep 5 running backs, that's a little bit crazy, but at least enough to keep 4 of them. Wide range of players are seen getting kickoff return reps in practice today. Noah Igbenogany was back there with Ja'Cory Crosskey-Merritt. By the way, the next time you see Ja'Cory Crosskey-Merritt, he's going to be wearing the number 22. So 32, no longer Ja'Cory Crosskey-Merritt's number. That number now actually belongs to Donovan Edwards, rookie running back out of Michigan, who's now on the practice squad. Ja'Cory Crosskey-Merritt, number 22. That's your guy Bill there next time you see him on the field. But he was also back there getting kick return reps. And I'm not saying he's going to be the kick returner, but I will say, and this isn't a pat myself on the back thing, this is just to remind everybody that I've kind of thought that Ja'Cory Crosskey-Merritt might have some kick return ability for this team quite a while now, but we'll see what they decide to do. Austin Eckler, Deebo Samuel, obviously were pretty dynamic during the regular season. So also Luke McCaffrey was back there again. Austin Eckler, Jeremy McNichols also getting in on those reps as well. Inside the coach's mind, DQ shared with us his biggest surprise from camp and his philosophy on high leverage situations. His wow moment from training camp was not really a play. It wasn't really a moment, but it was seeing the defense's communication reach a new level throughout training camp. And he really felt like they got better in those winning time moments, defending sideline catches, timeout management from a staff standpoint, and tackling. And I know some of you are going to say, tackling? Really? But DQ made a point and said, tackling this time this year is light years ahead of where tackling was this time last year. And he's very, very, very confident in what they're doing and feels like once they get things ramped up even more, they'll be able to do even more. The thing to remember about tackling is because of the NFL rules on practices, especially in training camp, the physicality, limitations and all that stuff, it's really hard for these guys to really go to the ground. They can't really do all that. So once the season begins, DQ pointed out, defenses tend to get better at tackling as the games start to stack because you're playing an entire 60 minutes of real life tackle football and you're getting those reps in now. And it actually made me think a little bit of week 1 against the Giants. Guess what? It's not just the Commanders defense that hasn't been able to tackle a lot here in training camp so far. It's the Giants defense, it's the Steelers defense, it's everybody's defense. So if you know that, you got Chris Rodriguez, who's a little bit of a pounder, right? A little bit of a bowling ball through the middle of the line. You got Austin Eckler, the savvy vet, Ja'Cory Crosskey-Merritt, who has the wiggle and the vision, Jeremy McNichols, who can do a little bit of it. I mean, look, let's run the ball at the New York Giants, see if you just can't exploit the fact they haven't had those clean tackling sessions so far this season. I don't know. We'll see if they incorporate something like that. On 4th downs, DQ did say that his goal is to, quote unquote, steal another possession. He views converting a 4th down as stealing another possession from the opponent. He informs his coordinators early in drives if there's an opportunity to potentially go for it, something that we already knew from last year as well. And he didn't really confirm this as much, but I'm telling you, The bringing in of Matt Gay is to give them just a little bit more flexibility in those long-range kick decisions, punt, field goal, or go for it. But I think Dan Quinn, he's a Tiger who wears his stripes. He's going to be aggressive on fourth down plenty this coming year. That's going to do it for today's episode and this week's final practice report. The Washington Commanders have 4 days off. We've got a couple of days off, but we will be back here early next week to start our season projections. We'll go through a record prediction, all kinds of stuff coming up for you on Locked On Commanders, so we'll get back to that starting Sunday night into Monday morning. Until then, if you want to send in questions, if you want to send in comments, if you want to be part of the program like never before, become a Locked On Commanders insider. Go to joinsubtext.com/LockedOnCommanders. Become an insider today. Not only do you get to influence the programming, but the programming is going to reach out to you more than ever before. NFL fantasy draft season is here, so to win your league, go to Locked On Fantasy Football on YouTube or wherever you're listening to this podcast for your second listen. And to the everydayers, I see you every day. I appreciate you every day, and I thank you specifically for coming through again today. Until next time, if you're out and about, please be safe, be kind to one another. We'll talk again real soon right here on Locked On Commanders, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.